Welcome everyone, Jesse here from Balanced Interactions. Before we continue to the video, if there's a question you would like to ask me, I'm going to put an email in the description. You can contact me there, or you can write a comment on this video and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Today we're going to be going over something that gets us all a little bit nervous from time to time, and that is the first date. So one thing you have to remember before we get stuck right into it is that not all first dates are going to be pleasant, okay? Even if you follow this advice to a T, first dates aren't always going to go well. Some people just aren't going to connect very well or get along very well in general. Your values might be different and you just might not see eye to eye in the long term. But with that said, following these tips will definitely get you ahead of the competition and much more prepared. Without any further notice, let's get right into it. 5 things to never do on a first date. While all these are important, the first one I want to talk about is definitely the highest on the list. Never talk about a past relationship, whether it's an ex-boyfriend or an ex-girlfriend. I hear about this and read about this far too often. The date is going well, then the sudden question about an ex gets brought up and it all comes crashing down. Something that I would like to add very quickly is that it's also never a good idea for you to bring up this topic, whether it's about your ex or their ex. It's not completely taboo, but it's definitely better to stray from this topic, at least until you've been on a few dates and have gotten to know each other better. And even then, if the topic does come up, keep it fairly light. There's a few problems that arise when it comes to the topic of an ex, but one that comes to mind is that it's not usually, and I emphasize usually, a positive topic to be talking about or to be dwelling on for some people. And I say usually because some people are still friends with their exes. The breakup wasn't bad and they have no negative feelings towards it. But for a lot of people, the reality is that they do have negative feelings towards the situation. There may be guilt, there may be sadness, there may be anger. If you are being asked about an ex and you have those feelings towards that person, it might be very tempting to say negative things about them. And obviously, it's very important that you don't. Saying negative things about a person behind their back or a past relationship can communicate many things to the other person. Most people don't want to hear about your past relationships or your exes that early into dating. There's just no need for that conversation to happen. It could really signify that you're still hung up on that person and have underlying feelings, which is definitely not a good vibe to give anyone. It also communicates, especially if you're speaking negatively about a past relationship or an ex, is that in the future, they may not be able to trust you because with things they tell you and things that they do, you may go behind their back and tell other people. So if the question is raised about an ex and questions are asked, the best thing to do is just to reply with a simple, neutral answer. The relationship was fine. We just realized we weren't right for each other in the end. Then after that, talk about something else. Change the topic. Otherwise, keep your mouth closed about this topic, at least until a later time in the relationship. The second big mistake people are making on dates is specifically where they're going for the date. I would love to know where this idea started, that going to the movies for a first date was a good idea. This, for a first date idea or anything similar where verbal communication is very limited, is a horrible idea. You go on a date to get to know each other. And how do you do that? Obviously by talking, asking, and answering questions about one another. If you go to somewhere like the movies on a first date, you're not going to know much more about each other at the end of the date than you did at the start of the date. It's just completely pointless and a complete waste. Best thing to do is to keep a first date light, go have some dinner, have a few drinks, go for a walk, so on, so on. Put yourselves in a situation where you can effectively communicate. The third thing I want to talk about is also fairly important. When it comes to talking, you really don't want to talk about yourself too much, especially doing things like bragging. So basically what I mean about this is things like bragging about how much money you make, bragging about how many fancy cars you own and how much they cost and how expensive they were. Basically just bragging about materialistic things in general. And I'm going to talk about this from the male's perspective because usually, not always, but usually it's the male that feels the need to brag about these sorts of things. If a guy talks way too much about things he possesses materialistically, it can come across as just that, bragging. It can also come across as you're not feeling good enough as a person, so you need to brag about all the materialistic successes in your life so that you can feel validated by them. And it may seem far-fetched, but to a lot of females, it really does come across like that. And yeah, there are females out there that are in it for those sorts of things. But I wouldn't stress too much because it's quite uncommon and you wouldn't want to be with a person like that anyway. A good joking around, cocky, charming sort of brag isn't going to put a female off. Just try not to go overboard where you feel like you need their validation. Alright, so moving on to the next one. And this one is probably one of the most important. Personal hygiene. And even though this one seems super obvious and just common sense, I've heard of many horror stories where a person has gone on a date and the other person has stunk, whether it's their clothes, BO, their breath, And this really shouldn't happen. It's such basic self-care. There really isn't much to say about this one. Just don't put on clothes that haven't been washed, brush your teeth, chew some gum, put on some antiperspirant deodorant, and if you have some nice cologne or perfume. Easy done. And the last one I want to talk about, you've heard it 100 times, just be yourself. Be the best possible version of yourself that you can be. Don't be afraid to show who you really are. I'm not saying go overboard and do weird things that you do with your friends back at home, but don't be afraid to speak your mind or have your own opinion just because you're scared of upsetting the other person. I'm not saying be mean or rude, but not being scared to throw your opinion out there and your thoughts on something can show lots of confidence, and that's very, very attractive. Just be yourself. Be the best version of yourself. Even if that means potentially not having a second date. It doesn't matter. You don't want to be with the person that doesn't want to be with you for you anyway. So to wrap things up nicely, don't talk about past relationships. Don't do things like a movie date where verbal communication is very limited. Don't talk too much about yourself, especially things like bragging. Make sure you have good personal hygiene, and make sure to always be yourself. The best version of yourself. If this video was of value to you, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already. If you have a question for me, you can write to me at the email that is in the description below. Otherwise, you can leave a comment on this video and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Thanks for tuning in, guys, and I'll see you all next time.